You may have heard there's something that could be coming for all of us.
You're now talking about a bloodbath for white-collar workers because of AI.
But concerns are growing about AI replacing some human workers.
I think people shouldn't put their head in the sand. It is going to affect jobs.
Thousands of workers with AI.
AI is coming for your jobs.
And we've all seen the headlines and reports in recent years of AI potentially replacing millions of our jobs. So we decided to ask what would happen if everyone's 9 to 5 became optional. My research led me down several rabbit holes. I went back to the philosophy of AI being discussed thousands of years ago, examined previous waves of job loss like street candle lighters and elevator operators. Then I examined Alaska's approach with paying its citizens a base income, as well as what's happening with AI in the Philippines. And through all the shouting, fear-inducing headlines, I found something that's more positive than bleak. There's a lot of numbers and projections being thrown around these days for what the future of jobs will look like with AI. So in order to understand that process fully, we need to look at 3 things: what the data actually shows right now, what history tells us about this kind of disruption, and what happens to an economy when work becomes optional. Alright, so there are several outlets from Goldman Sachs to the World Economic Forum that have tried to predict how many jobs would be impacted by AI. Figures range from tens to hundreds of millions, but no one truly knows how many jobs AI will impact and in what industries. But that begs me to ask the question, with all our technology, how can experts not know the real impact of AI? Doesn't that just sound a bit helpless? Unlike when your partner insists on you always doing the laundry because you're just so much better at it than they are.
Okay, you caught me. I'm a laundry virgin.
This helplessness isn't learned. It's because of one thing: data. Take a look at this report I found from Stanford University that analyzed how we're tracking AI's economic impact. Because according to them, we're basically flying blind right now. Collecting and analyzing AI data across one company or country is one thing, but on a global scale, things get very complicated. You see, countries don't all track AI the same way. Their laws differ on whether companies must disclose their AI use. Some nations have AI transparency laws, while others have none. Take California, where laws require disclosure where customers interact with AI, except not all AI uses are covered. Germany relies on the EU AI Act, which still isn't implemented, and New Zealand, well, there's no national AI strategy at all. This is why without consistent data, we don't really know how workers spend their time, who's being helped and who's being hurt by AI. I mean, take newly graduated college students. The Stanford report found entry-level positions are hit hardest by AI adoption. Oxford Economics showed finance and tech grads now face the highest unemployment rates. These industries also happen to have seen the most proven advancements in productivity as a result of AI automation.
Coincidence? I think not!
Even JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs admit they've slowed hiring as they assess their AI future. But where does that leave us? We know we need cohesive global data to understand AI's long-term effects, but that doesn't help us, or recent grads, navigate any of this right now. And we have to talk about artificial general intelligence, or AGI for short. Not the usual garden variety AI you ask for plumbing help or meme ideas. AGI can think, learn, and make decisions for itself, like an entry-level worker or a CEO. And if that sounds like just more media hype, think again, because every AI giant is chasing after AGI, and not much is stopping them. Looking back at a more innocent time of the mid-2000s rom-com era, Will Smith in Hitch once said,
I was just thinking that you can't really know where you're going until you know where you've been.
So before you grab your go bag in a panic, find the nearest tech bro and knock on their front door of their doomsday bunker begging for mercy, take a breath, and let's first rewind the clock back to 1830. The world is shifting from feudalism to capitalism. Peasants have become industrial workers. Steam-powered engines have replaced the sails on ships. Steam locomotives thunder across railways. Mechanized looms weave vast quantities of textiles, and they're doing it way faster than even the nimblest pair of human hands. Safe to say, the world was changing fast back then. I mean, just imagine you worked in the textile industry as a spinner back then. You show up to work and find your wheel replaced by a giant machine that does your job 10 times faster. But new technology brings new industries. Machines needed operators and mechanics. We didn't need people spending days or weeks creating just one product anymore. But instead of tossing them away, those workers were reallocated so they could build and manage the machines that would now create the product in a fraction of the time. Now fast forward to the 1950s. Analog is turning digital. Now computers are the ones replacing mechanical jobs, and once more, new industries and markets are created. Now guess how many of today's jobs do you think would not have existed in the 1950s? 30%, 60%? Try an estimated 85% of today's jobs didn't exist in the 1950s. Out of 270 census-listed occupations in 1950, only one disappeared entirely due to automation: elevator operators. That's just one job lost to automation in 75 years. But this time, something just feels different. We're seeing a new kind of revolution, one that moves faster than we've seen before. AI doesn't just replace repetitive tasks, it could replace thinking, decision-making, writing. What happens when there aren't just fewer jobs available, but when there's fundamentally less work that needs humans to do it at all? When the relationship between work, money, and survival breaks down entirely. This is what economists are starting to call post-labor economics. Now, to understand post-labor economics, we need to use our imagination a little bit. Imagine you own a matcha company, and one day, you decide that it's time to replace all your workers with robots and AI, both the ones in factory and in the office. Suddenly, you don't need to pay workers. Your costs plummet. You can slash your prices and still make a profit. And all of that may sound amazing, but here's the catch. Those workers you replaced, they were also customers. They used their paychecks to buy groceries, coffee, and yes, maybe even your matcha. Now they have no income, which means no spending. So even if your matcha is cheaper, no one can afford it. See, automation makes perfect sense for one business, but if every business automates, no one has jobs, no one has income, and the whole system sort of grinds to a halt. This is something economist David Shapiro has coined as the economic agency paradox. Automate too much and you end up eliminating your own consumers. All right, all of this just sounds like fiction. Why wouldn't we pay workers enough for the value they created, so in turn afford the things, well, we create? But the truth is, this has slowly been unfolding in front of us. You see, in 1973, productivity was going through the roof. Workers were producing more value than ever before. But their wages? Well, take a look at this graph. See this line going up and to the right? That's the value being generated by workers, and that line right below it, that's workers' wages. For years, those lines were close together because wages were tracking with productivity. They were like true best friends, until suddenly they weren't. The breakup was almost sudden. As you can see, wages stopped growing alongside productivity, which kept on rising. That productivity is still rising, yet decades on and wages have stayed stagnant. Economists call it the Great Decoupling. Everyday people are being more and more productive, creating even more value than they were 50 years ago. The data proves it, but very few are seeing that value reflected in their paycheck, which seems to have less purchasing power compared to even just 5 or 10 years ago, let alone 50. Now, I'm not saying it's as simple as comparing the numbers from back then to the numbers now, and with AI accelerating productivity even further, well, something's gotta give. I want us to look at the Philippines for a second because its economy thrives on outsourced services like call centers and transcription. But now, 89% of those jobs are at risk of automation. This is something that should sound familiar because it's what happened in America when manufacturing jobs were outsourced abroad. Cities like Detroit felt the impact of this. But this time, the work isn't moving overseas from one human workforce to another. It's moving from humans to a new type of machine with no guarantee new jobs will emerge fast enough to replace them. So yes, it's true, some parts of this seem pretty bleak, but history also shows that we adapt. After all, just look at our inventions. We've created machines beyond our grandparents' wildest dreams, and we learned how to do it at mass scale. Every shift sparks creativity and resilience. We just need to ensure everyone can share in that adaptation. So why should this shift be any different? Well, if you're like me, you may use AI every now and again to ask a question. And honestly, it's really useful, but how can something confined to our devices shake so many things up? Well, it all comes down to an agreement, one many of us weren't really aware of when it started. An agreement over something we have been giving tech companies in return for entertainment, connection, and convenience. And crucially, the amount of it will determine which industries get automated first. It's data, specifically our data. Remember, AI is built on large language models, or LLMs for short. They learn how to respond to questions by feeding off massive amounts of data, scanning representations of everything they've learned to predict an accurate answer. Now, when you ask ChatGPT a question, sometimes it can get things very wrong, and at other times it nails it. But that's just a public-facing AI used by consumers like you and me. What companies are investing in is in creating their own controlled LLMs. And the more data an industry has, well, the faster it gets to automating repetitive tasks. Let's go back to JP Morgan, because they've been investing in AI since 2012. Feeding their LLM data for years, training it on processes, contracts, agreements, and of course, the markets. Because the more controlled data it has, the more accurately it can provide information or support. This is why industries with tons of digitized data, finance, factories, software development, customer service, are likely the ones getting disrupted first. And the people working in them either face total displacement or must somehow completely evolve. And we know this time it's not just physical work that's at risk. Actual desk jobs are the ones most at risk, since those jobs often mean working with data. And trying to evolve and compete against AI automation that works both faster than most workers and does so at a lower cost than a human worker, well, experts are realizing this shift may be difficult for the average person to evolve with, the way they've done before. See, the problem is that human labor has always been a central part of our society, of the global economy. But as we saw with the matcha company example, total AI automation means no more income and no more human labor. So how on earth do we solve this problem? Well, this brings us to one of the most discussed solutions, even among AI CEOs: universal basic income. UBI sounds simple. Everyone gets money, no strings attached, whether you work or not. Well, even if it's a simple principle, there are a lot of questions to ask, like who's paying what, how much are they paying, and where's the money even coming from? Or for those of you a little more suspicious, maybe you've already decided that while basic income might sound cool in theory, on a practical level, there's just no way this would ever actually work. But there are some real-life examples that I want to talk about that prove its capabilities. Enter Alaska. Since the 1980s, Alaska's citizens have received annual payments of $1,000 to $2,000 from the Alaska Permanent Fund, which invests a quarter of the state's mineral revenues for mostly oil. But hold on, it's not like we're in a post-labor economy just yet. Wouldn't free money mean people just stop working? Well, let's take a look at Stockton, California. In 2019, the city of Stockton decided to experiment with a guaranteed income project. It went something like this. 125 low-income residents were randomly chosen to receive a monthly check of $500, no strings attached, for 2 years. And the results, well, they were actually pretty surprising, because those people didn't just rush to quit their jobs. Instead, they saw a 50% increase in full-time employment. Turns out that having some extra money actually gave people more options. It freed people to turn down desperate job offers and hold out for something better. They could afford gas to get to interviews, childcare, the things that help you find work. Even OpenAI's research arm has run tests on the feasibility of universal basic income. In Texas and Illinois, from 2020 to 2023, 1,000 low-income individuals were given $1,000 a month. Then separately, a control group was given $50 a month. Again, the researchers found that parents who received the transfer spent more on their children and reported improvements in caregiving. Okay, but what works for 1,000 people doesn't mean it would necessarily work for everyone. Scaling UBI would be expensive, around $3 to $4 trillion annually just in the US. So how do we pay for this? Some have proposed taking existing welfare programs like Social Security, Medicaid, SNAP, and consolidating them into a single UBI program. And it would certainly help, but the government would still need to trim spending in other areas, like defense. Then there are also ideas like implementing wealth taxes for the top 1%, or we could tax automated production, like Alaska's oil dividends. Maybe we could create more wealth funds from AI and data instead. But there may be solutions beyond money, and when it comes to the importance of work, there's something we haven't talked about yet: meaning. While it may not be the case for everyone, work gives many people purpose, identity, and structure. Have you ever seen those occasional horror stories of people who win the lottery, but it ends up ruining their lives? Although this is more an exception rather than a rule, having an abundance of unstructured time after years of structured routines, which also applies to retirees and the unemployed, can lead to depression rates soaring. However, some could argue that AI replacing our jobs would free us to focus on science, creative endeavors, and community enhancement, allowing people to focus more on the things they want to do rather than having to do it to survive. So, what are we doing to address this right now? In July 2025, the Trump administration released America's AI Action Plan. It aims to balance innovation with worker protection, and one of those protections addresses the issue that we started this video with, the lack of data on AI's true impact on the workforce. Congress is also exploring ways to regulate automation. Senator Bernie Sanders has pushed to implement a robot tax on companies that replace human jobs with AI or robotics. Then the funds generated from that automation would go towards retraining workers and recoup lost payroll tax revenue, which, unlike income tax, specifically funds social insurance programs like Social Security and Medicare. Other places like the Philippines are investing heavily in AI education. They hope that by 2028, the majority of its population will be educated on the use of AI. The government is empowering its citizens to use AI like a sophisticated tool, not just be replaced by it. Economists also see promise in what they call elastic sectors, industries where AI boosts output but without reducing the human workforce. Let's look at healthcare, for example. Currently, when you go to the doctor, instead of actually seeing your physician's face, they're often buried behind a computer screen, frantically typing up your patient notes, which they legally have to do, but what if AI could take these notes for them? Doctors could spend more time actually talking to patients, allowing the quality of their care to improve. Then there's the hands-on trades to consider. There's been a steady decline in the number of plumbers, electricians, and mechanics, so much that it's actually a real problem. But until robots develop dexterity and judgment for those tasks, these jobs will be considered safer and attract a fresh flow of workers. So there are in fact reasons for us to hope, and if history is any judge, whenever a major turning point in society has happened, humanity always finds a way to adapt and evolve. And while we see AI growing faster than previous industrial advancements, there's still the fact that companies need enough data in order to support their needs, and that data takes time to collect, refine, and build upon. We've seen how people and countries across the globe are exploring AI's impact on the economy and human labor. But there's something else we haven't talked about yet: how AI could impact artists. Remember at the start of this video, we saw how AI needs a constant flow of data in order to function. Well, a lot of that data comes from human creativity. Whether it's a professional artist or casual amateur, every tweet, photo, video, book, or painting we make and put online makes up the raw material that keeps AI alive. And yes, AI can now generate art, illustrations, poems, songs, work that paid artists used to do. But here's the thing, without that constant flow of fresh creative expression, AI's output degrades, a phenomenon dubbed model collapse. Those AI-generated books and songs that seem so advanced would start to feel just plain bad. Human beings don't have this issue. We continuously perceive the world, fueling our creative imaginations. Fresh ideas are what change the world, whether it's for a story, a painting, or an invention like the power loom. Rather than treat AI as a rival, artists could collaborate with the machine, not compete against it. Use it as a way to scale ideas, explore styles, and bring visions to life faster than ever before. Perhaps that's what scares us when we imagine living in a world without work. Because when labor disappears, it's not just the paycheck that vanishes, it's the structure around which we've built meaning. So even if we adapt, even if workers and artists alike could learn to work with AI instead of against it, that still leaves a bigger question. If work itself stops being how we measure worth, what's left to define us? It's a question every generation has faced in its own way. From farmers watching machines plow their fields to artists watching algorithms paint their dreams. In a world where people don't need to work to survive, perhaps the real challenge isn't about how we'll make money. It's about what will give us purpose instead, and whether society can adapt to that change. Well, if post-labor economics ever does arrive, it likely won't be in the form of a steep cliff. It'll be more of a slope. And that slope is our adaptation window. We just don't know if it will happen slower or faster than what we've seen in the past. We've seen how post-labor economics presents a scenario where human labor becomes peripheral to production, a scenario where work is optional instead of necessary, where income gets decoupled from employment. The Industrial Revolution saw a replacement of muscles with machines. 200 years later, and we're now replacing human intelligence with artificial intelligence. But solving the problem of replacing income in a post-labor world is still a hard nut to crack. Perhaps it's something simple like basic income, and we're just missing what later will seem obvious. Or maybe instead it's one of those things beyond most people's imaginations right now. After all, it probably would have been next to impossible for the average 19th century weaver to imagine a machine like the power loom could ever exist, let alone that such a machine would end up replacing them. And yet, that's exactly what happened. So it's clear that the question of what a post-labor future holds for us all is an important one. But perhaps there's an even bigger question we need to ask, one that's not more important, but more imperative. Will we find the solution in time before the system breaks, or will we all just end up asking AI to fix it for us? We covered a lot of ground today, so if you want to dive even deeper, we've linked some great resources in the description. Definitely check them out, and as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with a friend who loves learning as much as you do.